How's it going everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this abstract text background on Photoshop. We're going to be using Mushiala for this design. I've decided to kind of try and mix up a little bit from the blues, so I've gone with more of a red and white theme in this case, and in the video we're going to be mainly focusing on the background of this design rather than the cutout of the player itself. So we're not going to be doing any kind of tutorial on the treatment or any processing of the cutout, but you can see that in my latest video which came out a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, just quite a fun little piece to create, something very easy to make, and you can very easily tweak this to match whatever design you're working on. You can add more elements into it, play around with the text to kind of create different variations of the design. So yeah, it's a fun little effect to introduce into your designs. And yeah, let's get straight into it. But before we do, if I could ask you guys to drop a like and a subscribe on my channel, as it will basically just help my channel grow, and I will continue to create more videos for you guys basically. But yeah, let's get into it. So I'm just going to hide this original layer just to show you what I basically started off with. So if we just hide this, I basically started off with this image of Mushiala, and I've just used generative fill to get rid of him in the middle in case my cutout wasn't 100% accurate. So let's now bring him back in, and I've also kind of adjusted the angle of the picture just to make it a little bit more dynamic, just so it's not flat with the pitch ending on basically a straight line in the background, but it's more of an angled look. And yeah, it just kind of, it's a little bit different. It's not as still, like I said, it's a bit more dynamic, and it's something a little bit different to bring into your designs. But the thing that we're going to be focusing on initially is this background shape, which is literally just a cutout enlarged, and then obviously we've masked the image to go into that. So let's get started with that. So what I'm basically going to do, open up your layers. I've duplicated the layer of Mushiala as the cutout, and I've basically just scaled it up quite a lot and placed it just enough so it covers straight from the top to the bottom, and it hits basically just within the edges of the design, and we've got a nice big space to work with. And then with the background, I've kind of grouped this already. So you've got your generative fill. I've just tweaked the original image a little bit, and I've added a little bit of room towards the top. But yeah, make sure to group this. And then what I've done to make this red, I've just added a hue and saturation layer with colorize ticked on, saturation 43, -11 on the lightness, and the hue on 0 just to paint it red essentially. And then what we can do, hide obviously this blown up image of Mushiala, hide it, and then press Control or Command on the thumbnail to select the area. And then when you go on the background group, you just want to mask it just so it clips it to this area, and we kind of have the white background showing through behind. One thing that we will do before we progress with this any further, I'm just going to get a large soft brush and kind of just paint in a few darker bits towards the bottom of this design just to add a bit of a gradient to this, and we'll probably keep it at 18%. Looks all right, so we'll keep it at that. But now, one thing that we will add into this background as well, it's looking very flat at the moment, which I'm not too happy with, so I'm going to just zoom out slightly, and we're going to just use again a nice big brush with quite a dark red selected, and we're just going to paint in kind of the bottom left section of this design. We'll have the light kind of coming from the top right and the top left really, so I'm going to kind of make the bottom part a little bit darker. So we'll bring it down, and then I'm going to stick this on soft light just to create a bit of a shadow, the bottom left corner. And also what I'm going to tweak, as you can see, there's a bit of this mask that isn't sitting right with me, so I'm just going to get another soft brush, make it slightly smaller, and actually reverse my brush, just quickly pressing X so you can switch between the two colors, and just paint in this area so it's shown as well, so that's not bugging out my OCD. But now moving back to this clip sequence, so we've got the shadow now. We're going to make a new layer, and then press X again and use a red that I've basically just picked from the cutout itself. Again, make it slightly larger and paint in a little bit of red towards the top, and then change the blending mode to linear dodge just to add a bit of variety and a harsh light to the background so it's not as flat. So pretty much there. Last thing I'm going to do is create a curves adjustment layer in the sequence again, and maybe just bring up the lightness, the light points a little bit, and then again make the shadows a bit darker. So there we go. Already that's looking a lot more well, just has a lot more contrast, and it stands out a lot more. So previously this is what we had. We added the hue and saturation layer, the contrast, and then the shadows and the light from the top right. So there we go. We got the background main element really done. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create the text. So we're going to make a new layer, and then we're going to just select the text tool. I'm going to be using the Eurostyle extended font, which is quite nice. It's quite a slim font. I don't really like using anything too blocky for this, but obviously you're more than welcome to experiment with this further. And for this composition, what I've basically done is I've put the MU on one line and the S on another with the I, and I've just added a few spaces to the I, just so it basically, the I should appear here and then the S will be here. If they didn't have the spaces, it will kind of be covered by the cutout. And on the third line, we're obviously going to add the ALA, if I remember to actually do that in capitals. But yeah, so there we go. That's kind of the main text composition. The thing that I don't like about this at the moment is the space in between the lines. So we're going to bring this right down. And now once that's been decreased, we're going to kind of position this just in the middle of the composition. And if I actually hide or lock this, should I say, we'll be able to get a nice selection of this and just bring it into the middle basically of the design to fit the composition. There we go. So that's pretty good. Let me just hide this Mushiala layer. So we've got the text selected now. The next step, what we're going to do is we're going to turn it into a smart object. We can obviously go back and edit this further, but now we want to apply some liquify and the pinch effect. So first of all, we're going to do liquify. So we're going to go into filter, liquify, and I'm basically just going to create a bit of a more abstract look with this. Make the brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm basically just going to drag this M, maybe get the S up here, get the L and A slightly more dynamic, drag parts of the composition out of the actual frame, and just kind of don't go too mad with this. You kind of want to keep this looking like text. Don't go too crazy, but just add a bit of movement, add a bit of variety, and we've got something like this. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding the pinch, which is in distort, pinch, and we're going to use 50%, and it just kind of creates a nice pinch towards the middle. And I think now what we can do, we can adjust the size of this accordingly, and I'm kind of going to blow this up quite a lot, and it creates a nice nice composition now. Basically it covers all the way in the canvas. I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger just so it covers right up to the top and bottom. So that's quite all right, but I might actually play around with the liquify a little bit more, as I'm not too happy with the way this has gone. I'm going to pull the bottom up slightly here towards the middle, and then maybe play around with this side a little bit more just to bring it in a bit. Obviously this doesn't make the text look very pretty in some parts, but we're going to fix that with some adjustment layers later on. You just kind of want to get it looking very abstract, very organic with some of the shapes, and just add a bit of movement into the text so it's not just a nice flat block. But yeah, that kind of looks better. I'm quite happy with that. So now that we've got the distortion effects in place, we're going to add a gradient overlay onto the text just so it's not a flat color, make it linear, and then again we're going to pick the colors from the original image itself. So we want to get like a dark red towards the bottom of the text, and the top we're going to select a slightly lighter red. That's a little bit too light, just enough so it's a little bit of a difference from top to bottom, so that's pretty good. And now we're going to add the bevel and emboss effect. So there's a lot of different things that you can change here, but just to kind of give you a guide, I've got some settings already pre-written down. But we're going to change the technique to chisel hard. Then we're going to change the depth all the way up to 1000. Keep this on 0. I've gone for a light effect. Tick off this global light as well, so this doesn't affect any of your other elements. If you have any that are using any global light elements, just make sure to tick that off. And I've gone for an angle of 49 and altitude of 21, just so it's exactly the same as my previous design. Make sure to turn anti-aliasing on. Bloody hell, sorry about that. English is not my first language, but you know, trying my best. But yeah, so make sure to basically just tick AA on and then go into this. And I think we've picked this one as the variation. Yeah, that's the one. And I've played around with a few more settings here. So we went into color dodge and the highlights, went down to 45 on this, and then 35 and multiply on the shadows. So that's obviously a little bit choppy, but that's the kind of whole look of this effect, really. This is kind of what you end up with. And you know, it is pretty cool. If you want to play around more with 3D elements, you're probably creating them in Illustrator or programs like Blender or Cinema 4D. You can kind of get a cheap version of 3D-ish looking objects using the bevel and emboss. There are a lot more in-depth tutorials out there on how to do that, so make sure to check some YouTube videos out if you kind of want to play around with this any further. But yeah, so now once that's done, we're going to turn this into a smart object again, so we don't mess around with any of the effects that we've just applied. And now we're going to play around with the blur gallery. So we're going to be using field blur when creating the kind of the blur on the edges and towards the middle of the cutout, just to, again, make it a little bit more dynamic. And make sure to turn on your edit pins in view. So in the middle of the cutout, I'm going to turn this to 0, as we don't really want the area around the cutout to be blurred, as I'm kind of using a basically like a camera works. So you've got this area in focus, and then as you get towards the edges of the canvas, you're going to have them more out of focus and more kind of coming towards you. So now that you've got this pin on 0, we're going to place a pin in the top left with quite a lot of blur. So I'll probably do about maybe not as much, maybe do 70. That's pretty good. And then basically just repeating the same process but slightly different values around the edges. So let's do like 57 down here. Down here, let's do probably like 80. That looks pretty cool. And then up top again, we're going to do around 66, and then maybe move this slightly just so we've got more of this in focus rather than it being blurred. But yeah, that's pretty cool now. Pretty happy with that. That looks okay. And then the last step of tweaking this abstract text is we're going to group this just for ease, and we're going to create a layer above it and then clip it down to the actual text layer itself. And we're going to be using the same red that we've used for the text initially, so it's quite a bright red, and we're going to just be painting some glow effects. So now I've also done a slight glow behind Mushiala, so we kind of want some light coming off from this. So basically we're just going to go in and change the blending mode to linear dodge and just paint in some light areas of the text itself, just to add a little bit of, again, contrast, a bit of vibrancy into it, and just kind of paint the areas that are going to be affected by the light coming from the middle. You can play around with this, but you know, just to add so it's not just a flat color. Even though we've got the gradient on the text itself, we do kind of want to bring a little bit more color and more like shadows and highlights to it, really. But now that you've got the highlights, just so you can see, it just adds a little bit of something extra to the text. We're going to create a new layer underneath it, just with straight black, and painting some shadows on the text. So I'm going to change the opacity of this down to about 25%, and just basically just begin painting areas that you think will be covered and we'll have some shadows. So there we go, just very quickly. And as you can see, again, just something extra, and keep this underneath the actual highlights, just because you want the highlights to be popping more and going over the shadows themselves. But that is looking quite nice already. Pretty happy with that. And then another thing that you can do just to kind of make this even more dynamic, once you've got the text, you can duplicate this layer and change this to a smart object, just so you've got it all in one, and bring this above Mushiala and kind of painting bits over the actual cutout itself. So you can do a layer mask, invert it with Control I, and then you can kind of paint in some bits over the actual cutout, just so it looks like some parts are kind of coming over Musiala, and he's kind of more in the composition. I think the initial example that I showed did this a little bit better due to the way I liquefied the text, but it's not too bad, so we'll just keep it at that. And if you want it, if like a very exact way to do this, you can just highlight in your Musiala cutout or whatever cutout you're using. Again, just press Control and click on the thumbnail, go back to the layer mask, and you can just basically paint in exactly in the area that you want without kind of having any additional overlaps outside of it. But that's pretty much that done. The final thing that we'll be doing is just adding a few adjustments, but this is very standard. I do this in a lot of my design. So we add the color lookup 3 strip adjustment layer with 60% opacity around, and then the curves just a little bit, as you can see the difference, just to make it a little bit brighter and make the shadows and kind of the darker areas a little bit darker. And again, just make it a little bit more vibrant. And then one more thing that I added are these little speckles of well, particles or dust or little light particles from Texture Labs. This is basically, if we just delete the layer mask, a picture straight from a Texture Labs. I've downloaded it in. I've changed the hue and saturation just so it's red and it matches the composition more, quite easy. And then obviously change it to screen. You add a layer mask onto it. I just inverted it to cover it, and then you can go back in and paint where you want the particles to actually be showing. So I just did it around kind of where the light is coming from in the background, just to add a little bit of particles. So I think that's pretty much that for this. As you can see, yeah, well, I mean, slightly different to my original one. And one more thing as well that I've forgot to tell you, but I will showcase it on this. I've basically just added 2 letters here, so an M and an U, and then basically the same thing that I did to the text previously. If I'm just going to show you, we've got a nice bevel and emboss again with a gradient overlay. So that's kind of saved. And then I've literally just added a straight field blur layer onto this. I didn't change any pins. I've literally just dropped a pin on there and it was on 29% blur. And then I've literally just duplicated the effect straight over to this M that's on the other side of the composition, just so it kind of fills the space, because it kind of felt a little bit empty. If I take these away, as you can see, a little bit empty, so I wasn't 100% sure with the way this looked, but this looks much better. And then another thing that I had in the original was the text in the background. As you can see, it's just slightly showing towards the edges of the composition, but personally I think it looks better without. So let's probably keep it off, but that's pretty much that. I think the composition in general looked a little bit better on the original, but it literally was the same thing. Again, I'll just show you very, very quickly. If you just go into the text, it was just a liquefied text with the bevel and emboss. And this is what the text looked like before. Once it was liquefied and pinched, this is what the composition looked like. And again, you can apply a few more effects just to show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like currently. If you want to play around with this further, you can add another liquefy adjustment to this, and obviously just play around with whatever direction and tweaks you want to make to this. So let's kind of make it a little bit more dynamic, a lot more prominent. And then if we save this, this will update it straight on your original artwork. So there we go. So this is the after, and then if we just go back, this is the before. So honestly, you can just do whatever you want with this effect, really. This is quite a tame use of it, but it matched the composition really well, and the kind of the effect in the background, it worked quite well with it. But yeah, that's it really. I think the only other thing that I've added onto this was this little just small glows, which is just red painted on, changed to linear dodge, and I actually kept it on 100% just to again make the glow behind Musiala pop a little bit more. But that's it for this video. It was quite a quick and easy, fun little addition that you can add to any designs that you're playing around with quite a plain background. It's very easy to do. You can really go hard with this and experiment with this a lot further than I have. It's quite, like I said, it's a very tame use, but it's fun, something different. And I thought a lot of people have been asking for abstract background tutorials of stuff that I do, and this is quite similar to what I did on my Conor Gallagher piece from a couple of months ago. And it was literally just this with a slightly different composition, and the background layer was slightly different, and it was black rather than white. And it worked pretty well in that case. But in this case, with the white kit being kind of the primary color on the top, I think it worked quite well with the white and red. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, guys, like always, make sure to leave a like and a comment. Suggest any videos that you want to see in the future, and obviously subscribe if you want to see more of my videos in the future. There'll be a video every 2 weeks, but I think I might throw in a surprise upload next week on floor shadows and kind of realistic shadows that you can add into your designs. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, I'll be seeing you in the next one soon.